Rosh.
Okay. A very good afternoon to everybody present. Thank you so much for responding to the invite from the Student Services Division and more especially from the HIV unit. With that warm welcome in mind, and on behalf of the Vice Chancellor of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Professor Nana Poku, our executive management, the academic sector, professional sector, students, and the executive director of student services, and our panelists, once again, a very warm welcome on this a little cold afternoon. With this in mind, we want to declare the webinar open. And as you all know, that today we want to address a critical issue, namely drug and substance abuse. For those who have attended our webinar last year that spoke to issues relevant to mental health, HIV, and substance abuse, we will recall the discussions that emerged from that webinar that spoke about the issue of alcohol and substance abuse as being a complex and multi-dimensional phenomenon with multiple layers of challenges, complexities, and tensions. We want today to look at how we can interrogate this phenomena, especially in the space of higher education, where students coming and multiple identities do converge in the domain of higher education. As we all know, that research highlights, or rather suggests, that alcoholism and substance abuse, drug abuse, is the most severe and prevalent mental health disorder. More recently, the World Health Organization actually declared this as a public health issue and a public health crisis, whereby persons dependent on alcohol are most likely to be highly susceptible to a variety of conditions that actually affect their mental health. So with this in mind, I also want to remind you of the interventions and the conclusions brought together by last year's webinar, in that we have to display the call to courage, and we have to rise strong. We have to have non-judgmental attitudes towards this issue and towards this societal challenge. But more importantly, that there has to be the visibility of relevant structures that will actually address the issue of alcohol and substance abuse in ways in which we can manage it and reduce it. More recently, COVID has come in, and even with COVID, it brings together its own intersections when we look at alcohol, substance abuse in the lockdown and in this COVID-19 moment, and if I can say, in the moment of the new normal. With that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, I want to provide a brief introduction to our first speaker. As I mentioned, we have 4 speakers, and our first speaker will be addressing us on the challenges facing students relating to substance abuse. May I now introduce Mr. Sandile Fortune Miandu. Mr. Sandile has a Bachelor of Education degree and specializes in physical science and mathematics. Above all of this is the executive member of Creative Network, which is a collaborative structure with UKZN and Mangosuthu University of Technology that goes ahead and publishes narratives of high school students. He is also the former peer education chairperson and is a member of the UKZN community engagement, which is led by Dr. Angela James from the School of Education. I hand you over to Mr. Zandile Miandu to address us on some of the challenges facing students relating to substance abuse. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roche. Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much to Pamela for the invite. Thank you to Mr. Kenneth Alaza for the invite as well. Today, we will be looking at the challenges facing students relating to substance abuse. As introduced, I am Sandile Fortunimiano, a former student and also a former chairperson of peer education. Currently, I am an educator at Pinetown Girls, teaching young girls physical sciences and mathematics. Now, when we look at substance abuse in the perspective of students, having spent 4 years at university, working together with different student organizations to deal or to address many issues facing students at the university level, we found that drugs and substance abuse become a very worrying issue when it's come to a student life at university. One looking at many students having to sacrifice their funding to buy alcohol, to use different drugs, and as they believe that it helps them to ease their pain. So we find students in a situation where they are going through a certain period, or maybe based on academic stress, then they decide that in order for me to just move away all this pain, I have to be intoxicated with some substance or some drug. Now, having all these facilities provided by the university, but most students are not utilizing the facilities provided to them, such that they end up finding themselves in the wrong side of the law. Because when the students have consumed alcohol, they start to behave or they start to act in a way that they wouldn't act if they were not under the consumption of these substances. Now, in residences, we find students being on the wrong side of the law, such that once they have consumed alcohol, then they will start stealing other students' belonging. And in that way, we are saying in residences or in a university space, we find students not being safe, because now there are these students who are struggling or finding themselves in deep with drugs and substance abuse. Some students, they want to do away, but they're in a point where they just feel like I have to take this, I have to drink this in order for me to feel okay. I have to drink this in order for me to feel okay, such that it makes them to do things that they wouldn't do if they were not under the consumption of such substances. Now, we are looking at students being stealing in residences. We are looking at students committing crimes that they wouldn't commit if they were not under the influence of such substances. So when we look at drugs and substance abuse in the perspective of a student, this is a very serious issue, and I think it needs a serious intervention, because there has been a case whereby I think I have been a chairperson of peer education for the past 2 years at university, and in that period, we have dealt with so many issues, especially relating to drugs and substance abuse. You find that students, they get paid, they get their money from funding different bursaries, and then what they do is, or the first thing that they think about is, we have to buy alcohol, or we have to go out, we have to do this and that, and in a way that after they've done that, or during the process when they are busy drinking the alcohol, and now they're intoxicated with this alcohol. Now they end up doing things like raping each other, sleeping with each other without consent, like touching each other in an uncomfortable way, which will lead to the sexual harassment. You find other students reporting that they've been harassed by other students because of those students were drunk, or maybe there was a certain drug that they've utilized at that particular moment. And also you find that a student wakes up the following morning and they find out that they've been raped. But now the issue comes up saying, I don't know who raped me. The last time I checked, or last time I remember, I was with this group of friends and we were busy drinking this type of alcohol. And in that midst, while they were drunk, and then they started to do things that they wouldn't do if they were not under the influence of alcohol. So we find drugs and substance abuse in a perspective of students being a very, very big issue, especially when it comes to the relationships that have been formed in universities. We understand that students at the university level, they end up engaging in this romantic relationships in a way that if a partner, or maybe say if a male partner feels like, or the male partners, they feel like they're superior to the women partners. So now we find ourselves in a space where we have to intervene and deal with a situation where the boyfriend was drunk, and then he wanted to sleep with the girl, and then the girl was not ready at that particular moment, and then the partner or the boyfriend forced himself into the girl. So we find ourselves having to deal with so much because of the influence, or because of this factor, or this issue of drugs and substance abuse, because we understand that most people wouldn't be able to, or wouldn't have the courage of forcing themselves in their partners, because I think that's also should be a factor we must be looking at. It's saying when we look at the relationships formed among students at a university level, and also some students not understanding the effects of the drugs and alcohol in their relationships, can be friendships, but mostly we look at it in relationships that are more romantic or more intimate. So we find the boyfriend having to force himself into his girlfriend, thinking because right now I'm under the influence of this alcohol, I'm under the influence of this drug, then I am superior to my girlfriend, or I have to do this. If you don't want to do it, we'll do it by force. So this issue of drugs and substance abuse have been going and going, and it is a very big problem when it comes to students. And also it is one factor, a very big factor that lead to gender-based violence, whereby you will find that people are now fighting, or maybe a boyfriend is now hitting a girlfriend, or a girlfriend is hitting a boyfriend while they are under the influence of these drugs that they are consuming in the university space. And also, I think when we talk about students, they go through a lot of things. And in this way, I feel like we still need a mechanism that we can use to make students understand that there are other facilities that they can use other than using alcohol, or other than using drugs for them to face their challenges, or to go through a certain pain or certain grief. Now, especially when students when students are approaching the end of the semester, I think that at that time that is where we find ourselves in a position of having to check our marks. How did you write this test? How did you write this exam? And then when a student notices that they are not coping, or they are not doing well, instead of them approaching the professional side that is provided by the university to deal with such, they just think, what the use of me going to that one, because it has already happened, I've already failed. Rather, I just go and just buy this bottle of vodka, or I just go and buy dagga, or just go and buy this type of drug. And then if I can be high, then I can forget about all this that is going through, or that is going on with my academic life or my academic space at that particular moment. So I think the problem lies with the students not understanding the importance of utilizing the professional space provided by the university for them to deal with any issues that they're going through, be it their personal life, be it their academic life, and then they end up thinking or feeling like it is a good thing for them to just be high, and then they can forget about their issues, they can forget about their troubles and all that. And also, I think um, in my 4 years at university, I've had a very traumatic and a very painful experience as a student, as one of the people who were working very closely with students, assisting with many things. Now, there was this one time where we encountered a student who has been like into deep with using drugs, alcohol, and all that. And when we go to a session of asking the student what was going on, what is happening. Now the student is in a position where he can no longer um, uh, find himself living without using drugs, or without being high, or without drinking alcohol. He needs to always be high so that he will forget about all these things, and he will forget about him thinking about to commit suicide and all that. And when we did our research and we did our investigation on the student, we found that the student was introduced to drugs because of the homophobic friends of homophobic students in a university space. So now the student is gay. Now he has been suffering from other students, or rather friends, mistreating him, or calling him names, and name shaming, and all that. So now the only thing that he feels is right is for him to be high at that particular moment, so that he can just forget about all these things that have been said, or that are being said to him at that particular moment, because people are calling him names. They're saying he's this, he's that. Now he has found a solution, of which it is not a good solution at that particular space, because now he says, if I am high, at least I don't care about what he's saying. And if I'm drunk, I don't care. I just do whatever I want to do. But now what happens when he's not drunk? It's just a disaster, because now all these things, they just come back hitting up. And also, I think having to deal with a community, having to just educate them about the different preferences, or different gender preferences of people, or different things that people want to do with their lives. Maybe we can reach a point where we say many students will not want to conform with alcohol, want to conform with drugs, just because they are just running away from the situation they are going through at that particular moment. So I think that situation that we came through, or we came across at that space, it made me realize that we are in a space where people are not educated, and people do not respect or understand the stance of people with their lives. So now they feel like they can say whatever, or they can do whatever they want, judging people's lives in any manner. Now, this also, the judgment and all that, also leads to the student being involved with drugs, being involved with alcohol, being involved with so many things that he wouldn't be involved with if he wasn't going through that situation. So I think in this at this stage, or at this point, we need to be able to find ourselves in a position where we can be able to say, utilize the professional space provided, rather than focusing, or rather than going for the alcohol, going for drugs, in order for you to feel okay, or to feel better. And also, some students, they go through a lot of pressure. Now, there's a lot of pressure when it's come to a university space, because now there are no teachers who are following us. We're in residencies alone. We do whatever we want at our own time. Now we find ourselves, we find a first year student at the university space with a very collected mind. I know what I came here for. I know what I want. But now, as the year progresses, the student will find himself or herself in a position where they are forced to take a certain drug, or they are forced to drink certain alcohol, just because they have been pressured by a group of friends that they found at a university space. So now they will feel like in order for them to fit in, then they have to take this drug. In order for them to fit in, they have to drink this particular substance. So I think also this factor of students having to allowing themselves to fit in all positions at the university, makes them to be in a space where they are using these substances, they're using drugs in order for them to feel like, yes, I am in, yes, I am part of this group of friends. You find that some girls would call each other and say, can we go to this place? If you don't want to go, then it means that you are this and this. They'll be calling each other names if you don't want to do what they are doing, and they will look at you as someone who's just little-minded, or who don't know what they came here to do. So you have to do this in order for you to feel like, yes, I'm in a university now. Yeah, it's like an introduction of some sort. Like you have to introduce yourself in a way. So if you drink this, then we will know that, yes, you are here. You are now a student at university, and that's how most students are introduced into these drugs and substance abuse. Drugs and these substances, they start drinking alcohol not because they wanted to, but because of the pressure they under that particular moment. They start tasting. You start to taste, it comes back. You want to taste again, you want to taste again, and then it goes and goes and goes. At the end of the day, you are deep with drinking alcohol and all that. Now you have a problem, and also in dealing with how to move or how to come out in terms of these drugs and also the substances that are there at a university space. And also when it's come to male students, what I've observed mostly was the fact that us as males, we are of the belief that in order for you to say you are a man, you must do something. Then we say, yes, you are a man. A man does like this. A man do this. A man do this. And in most cases, we wouldn't be doing that or be in that space of saying, prove yourself that you are a man, if we were not intoxicated with some certain substance or a drug. So we need to first be high or first be drunk, and then we can say, hey, prove it to us. Prove to us that you are a man. And how do they prove that they are men? One, they can say, prove to them that you are a man by touching maybe a girl from behind, or prove by sleeping with that girl, or prove by fighting with this champ, or prove by drinking this amount of alcohol, or prove by taking this drug, and then we'll know that now you are a man. So all this is caused by the influence of these drugs and these substances that the students take, and they end up being in situations, or they end up being in trouble, not in trouble, not realizing that they got into that place because of the influence of alcohol, or being under the influence of a certain drug at that particular moment. Now, when you are proving yourself, say you're proving yourself by maybe injecting yourself with a certain drug. Now it will start by that one, and then the following morning you will wake up, then you want more. Can I prove myself again? Then you do it, and at the end of the day, we are living with a very small money that we get from our bursaries. So you get that money, you use it for groceries. The remaining money, you use it to buy these drugs. Once that money is done, now the money is finished, but you still need to take this drug. So now what will happen at that particular moment? That is why we find ourselves in a space where students are losing their belongings in a residence, because now these students, they need to be high. They want to buy this bottle of Hennessy. They want to buy this bottle of vodka. Now they want it, but the problem is they don't have money. So now how can they make money? Is by taking other students' belongings. So now this doesn't only affect a person individually, but it also ends up affecting people that are around that particular person at that particular point. Because now they will start stealing other students' belongings. They will start breaking into their rooms, wanting to take their stuff by force, and doing all that sort of things that will make them in a way, at the end of the day, be on the wrong side of the law. Because once they are caught, the university makes it clear on how they deal with that particular moment. So when we come to, or when we talk about challenges facing students relating to drugs and substance abuse, we are looking at a very broad topic because it leads, drug and substance abuse lead to many things taking place, especially in a student space. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Miandu. I'm sure the audience could not get enough of your insider perspective of being part of the student community. And I must add, very rich information came up there, which I'm going to harvest and speak about it in the end. Rich, brilliant, and robust information. And thank you so much for that. And our next speaker is Mr. Stembiso Ndlanzi, who is a senior information officer and is employed at Senka Durban, and whose core function revolves around prevention, training, and community development. And he works as a substance abuse facilitator and trainer, and he conducts training on employee wellness, and is a master trainer on the Kimoja project with the Department of Social Development. He's very involved with issues relevant to teenagers against drug abuse in communities. I hand you over now to Mr. Zandile Ndlanzi. Thank you. Before we go ahead, Mr. Zandile, please note the time frame, it's 15 minutes. Thank you so much. You may proceed now.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you said, it's Stembiso Ndlanzi, and I heard the last name you said. I'm not sure who was that, but it's Stembiso Ndlanzi from South African National Council. No problem. From South African National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. Our talk is going to basically looking at prevention. I like the first speaker went through the whole lot of why young people, students end up using drugs. But now we look at the side of SANCA and why, especially when you're talking substance misuse, why people end up misusing substances. Mainly, it's the drugs that people use, psychoactive drugs, are drugs that when you use, they give you a good feeling. So that's the main point. People use drugs because it gives them something positive. They enjoy how it makes them feel. They enjoy the feeling. That's why they keep going back on those drugs. Because there are many people who have tried to smoke, they're no longer smoking if they didn't enjoy the feeling. So if you end up with all the list that he was giving, people with depression and all those things, and you use alcohol or you take dagga and it makes you feel better, of course you will go back because of how it made you feel. So it's all about the good feeling. That's why young people end up abusing or misusing drugs. It's because of that feeling. I won't go through the whole list of the drugs that young people are using mainly or why, but I will just mention the trends that we are finding, working with young people in different colleges, universities, and also in high schools. We're finding that the main drugs that we are finding, especially with the youth, especially, it's your lean, where young people are taking cough mixtures and mixing with other things, which I won't mention because I'm not in the business of giving recipes. But young people are taking medication, which could be codeine, still pain, and other substances, which are opium-based. They take that and mix with those other substances, and they drink that because of how it makes them feel. They enjoy the feeling. So that is the one drug that we are finding it's creeping up all over, and almost everywhere we go around. We're finding lean or incinga is around. The second drug that is also a problem when you're talking about young people, it's dagga. Young people, I'm not sure what is happening in universities currently, because we're finding that most people who go to university, they never smoked a day. But by the time they finish, they will tell you why people need, how dagga is good for your body, how it's good, and it's natural and all that. So it's one of the drugs that we are finding mostly used by young people, especially students. Now it's not only boys. We know boys, they like taking risks and trying new things. Now we are finding ladies also that are using this thing. So dagga is mainly it's also up there, But as you was speaking earlier, spoke a lot about alcohol. So alcohol is one of the drugs that we are finding. But there are so many reasons why young also looking at alcohol as a good drug. Because of the reason that we're finding on TV, how it's being marketed to them. It goes with the lifestyle. People think you're looking cool. And if you see the ads, they make sure they put those nice looking ladies and guys there, and they're thinking that's the lifestyle. To enjoy life, you must drink alcohol. So that's how it's sold. And other people, other companies, they even target the universities and come and give these free drinks because they know once they start them early, they are becoming their clients for life. So alcohol is up there amongst the three drugs that I was mentioning. Iwunga, people talk about iwunga. The moment people start using iwunga or sugars, they leave universities. I met a young guy in Wunga Park. He says he's a student of UKZN. He's only short with two modules to finish his degree, but he's been there for 4 years. He can't finish the 2 modules because he then went on. So the moment they move from Itaha and start using the drugs like Iwunga or sugars, they leave the universities because they can't cope with the substance that you have to take almost every day. So these three I was talking about are what we are finding in universities, and it's used almost on daily basis. You go to universities, young people are drinking, young people are smoking. So it's out there every day. Let's quickly just look at influences also. Why DACA is up there. It's one of the reasons. It's the law. So confusing. I just came from the Chesterville right now clinic. There was, when I was asking, is DACA legal? There was so much confusion, which we find almost everywhere we go. There's a lot of confusion when it comes to this. What's the standpoint, especially of government, when it's come to DACA? And because of that, young people are starting to experiment with it because they feel it's okay. So because now the law is being relaxed, they think that means it's okay. So those are some of the reasons. Also, how we grew up, you find our uncles and everyone, they were smoking and saying it's a Zulu culture and all that. So those things they tend to give influence why young people are using it so much. And young ladies especially, they believe that if you smoke, it will make you lose weight. But because it's one of the highly unpredictable drugs, they end up eating more than what they were eating before they started and gaining more weight. But they've already hooked to the substance. So it's one of those things. As I was saying, the law, but what has not changed about it, we need to remind young people that it's one of the substances that lasts longer in your system. So if you are studying and you're smoking, you finish your degree, the next thing you are hired somewhere, the first thing they do what is called medicals. They check what is in your system. The next thing they find that you have the substance in your blood and you end up losing the job. That young people don't think about, that even if the laws are relaxed, no company want someone who uses drugs. And it's one of the drugs that they don't want. You end up, if you've been employed by the company, they send you to SANC. But if you've just been employed and you are still on orientation 3 months, they would probation for 3 months. They won't even keep you after the 3 months because they find something on your blood. So young people, they need to think about that. If you are still studying, avoid it. No company wants to work with someone who's on DACA. But the other thing that is bad for them is that it makes young people to be amotivational. They will come to university studying this, whatever cause, they start smoking. Down the line, they're switching courses. You end up finding these professional first years because every year they're starting a new course because they don't finish whatever they started. You can't concentrate when you're using DACA. And young people don't think about all those things. So it affects your memory also. You end up failing, you switch there, becoming a first year on something else, and you don't know that the cause why you're also topping on your marks or you are failing is because of the substance that you are using. It's bad if you are still studying. It affects your memory. And young people need to be told about that. They need to understand that. But it's also a gateway to other drugs. It's very bad because one thing that it does, you spend your whole life chasing this high, changing all these types of idaga you will find. The fancy name, all that space muffin, try the space muffin, your daga, your Durban poison, your iswat, your impondo, because you're chasing the high, and it becomes easy to then move to other drugs like ishukas or iwunga, which was never your choice, and your choice was just idaga. The next thing you are now on shukas, which it was never your choice. So that's one thing that people need to think about. The last thing about idaga as well is that it also causes mental illness. It's very bad for mental illness. For those who have started, who are listening on this, if they just want to prove that it really does, phone it up in mental health, phone it Fort Nape and Pietermaritzburg and find their stats. The last person I spoke to was in Phoenix. The lady from mental health told me that 70% of the patients that she sees in Phoenix is due to idaga. Previous to that, the lady I spoke to, she said 60% of the patients that she sees is due to idaga. So idaga is one of the biggest causes of mental illness, and young people don't know that. And lastly, we mentioned alcohol that the man was speaking about earlier. Alcohol, young people don't think that's one of the reasons, because he spoke about other things that are due to alcohol. So alcohol is very bad when it comes to spiking. You could be enjoying your drink. The next thing, your drink is being spiked. Something is put on your drink. So guys, it's easy for people to spike your drink, especially if you're drinking alcohol, because you are having fun, you're not even watching your drinks. The next thing is in your drink. And if you are caught by professionals, the tablet they use, it lasts for 48 hours. For 48 hours, they can do whatever they want. You can end up in someone's room, but if it's a professional, they will take you out of the university and end up in a hotel, those cheap hotels, and people are coming in doing whatever they want, whether they use the condom or not, it's up to them. The next thing, you end up getting pregnant, you don't even know who you slept with. And why they even use these tablets, you also lose your memory. You won't remember anything what happened within that 48 hours. So guys, if you are out there, look after your dreams. And it's also the drugs that we're talking about, two drugs that we were talking about, they are one of the causes why there is huge of dropouts. People start using drugs, the next thing they've left the universities with either they got pregnant or they end up moving to other drugs, which they never thought they would use. The next thing they have to leave the universities. But lastly, why other people are spiking your drinks, especially now, this is for ladies, it's human trafficking. They will spike your drink. The next thing, you're finding yourself, you are working the streets. You don't even know how you ended up there. Because your drink was spiked, the next thing, they introduce you to drugs. After that, you end up to work for whatever they've put you on, because no one will give you drugs for free. The idea is to get you introduced to drugs, and then you have to work for the drugs. But that's how they end up. You're finding young girls working the streets. One policeman told me the other day they had young girls working in Wendemia, and those are young girls, fresh. They don't even know how they ended up there. So it's always, guys, alcohol is one of the ways they can see young people to end up working the streets. So if we are out there, look after our drinks. And last thing that I need to say is that I always say this when I'm talking to young people, especially, that you have one choice when it comes to drugs. Any drug we are talking about, you have one choice. You will choose your first drug. Which drug you end up using, it's not going to be your choice. People always need to remember that. Young people will tell you, I want to drink ciders, the next thing they want beer, it's vodkas and all that, which was never their choice. So always remember, when it comes to drugs, you will choose your first drug. Which drug you end up using, it's not going to be your choice. Thank you. I think I did cover my 15 minutes and left time for questions. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. Stembiso Mdalanzi. Once again, my apologies. This is getting so profound. And, as we move along, we are having layers of richness and robustness in our dialogues and conversations around this issue. For me, as a social work practitioner, I working in the space of higher education, you brought home something so pertinent of how students chase the high. I think it just couldn't be said any other way. And that's a big point, that you have brought back home, even the issue of human trafficking. You get introduced to drugs, and then you got to work for the drugs. I think you showed us very vociferously the vicious cycle contained in this reality of drug misuse. But there's been a few questions, but we'll attend to it in the end. Thank you so much for that. And now we come to Ms. Nonkululeko Mkhize, and she's a social worker employed at the Sanka Outpatient Clinic, and she conducts substance abuse assessments, individual and group therapy at the outpatients clinic at Sanka. She's also involved in preventative work in the community. She holds a master's degree, and she's currently a postgraduate master's degree, master's student at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And she will further enlighten us on the discourse revolving around substance abuse prevention and what kind of support is available in the community. Thank you so much, and I hand it over to you, Ms. Mkhize. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nonkululeko Mkhize. I'm a social worker at the outpatient clinic from Sanka, Durban. So what I'd like to emphasize first is the fact that there is no cure for addiction. So our center caters for treatment services. We do have an inpatient facility where we are able to admit clients who have a substance use disorder, a substance misuse disorder, and we are able to treat our clients for a maximum of 3 weeks. We do, however, also have an outpatient clinic where we are able to assist clients in terms of therapeutic work, in terms of treatment while they're living at home. So mostly those will be students, those will be clients who are working, those will be probably single mothers who have families to take care of. But our programs involve both the medical and the therapeutic side. So we do have a range of professionals, be it in inpatient or outpatient, who assist in terms of medically. We have a doctor, we have a sister, and then in terms of your therapeutic work, obviously, we have our social workers who are able to offer individual and group therapy. We also do offer these services at community level. So currently we're working with communities around Durban, for example, Umlazi, we have Claremont, we have Chatsworth. So that's where we are able to replicate this outpatient program at a community level. So we are able, again, to assist in terms of schools who are able to refer to us, because we also provide programs for learners at schools who just started using substances. We also provide preventative work in the community where we are able to provide educational talks with factual information for learners and the community at large. So basically, our programs are all centered around the fact that we assist a client in terms of finding reasons why they started using in the first place, but most importantly, how will they live when they go back to the community without using the substance, but being able to cope, because most people who use substances will use this kind of substance as a coping mechanism, for example. So we are able to equip our clients with skills as to how they're going to cope in the community without using any substance. I think that will be it for now. I'll take questions in the question panel.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mkhize, for enlightening us on what is available to reduce this kind of risky behavior with with drugs and alcohol, and the intervention programs that you all are providing. And I'm sure we're going to come back to that in our discussions. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our last speaker, Dr. Varoshni Nadesan. She's going to address us on alcohol abuse in higher education. Dr. Nadesan is a senior lecturer at the University of Johannesburg. She's also a seasoned social worker and a court probation officer. She's had experience in that field. But she's also the national, she joined the University of Johannesburg in 2012. She is a non-alcoholic trustee on the General Services Board of Alcoholics Anonymous, South Africa. That's big, and that can tell you engagement, a deep engagement rather, to look at issues of alcoholism, what it does to the person, communities, and students. Further to that, she's a World Service delegate representing AA in South Africa. Welcome, Dr. Nadesan, and thank you so much. The floor is open for you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Subrayan. And I want to also pay tribute to the speakers before me for their very, very, experienced shares. I think the deep insight that has been shared, the insider's perspective, as you referred to it, is quite enormous, really. It was really quite insightful. Now, my discussion is on alcohol use and abuse in higher education. But what we do know is that alcohol and substance abuse prevalence has been high amongst youth, and more alarmingly high amongst university students globally. The South African university students are not different from any other students around the globe. Now, there's a lot of debate about whether alcoholism is a disease. The modern disease theory of alcoholism argues that problem drinking may be related to or even caused by a disease in the brain, which itself may be characterized by altered brain structure and altered brain function. Alcoholism was actually declared a disease in 1956 by the American Medical Association. But this theory was disputed in 1992, and there's a publication in PubMed.gov that says that excessive drinking can cause physical disease and physical dependence without being a disease itself. Thus, the disease concept of alcoholism is not needed to justify medical intervention. And the specific disease concept is actually largely associated with the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. However, we do need to explore preventative and treatment responses to problem drinking, especially in the effort to detect and modify problem drinking at an early age. Now, the more general disease concept is ineffective in actually engineering or engendering sympathetic attitudes toward problems drinkers amongst the general public. It's more useful to view problem drinking as a result of interaction between the person's personality and the social context in which he or she has learned to drink. And you've heard this from all of our speakers prior to me. But this is in effect what Bandura refers to as the social learning perspective. This is just a comic, looking at the average teenage brain and looking at the center of decision making. Now research shows that the center of decision making actually matures in some people around the age of 25, give or take, may differ in different people. But ultimately, the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, that's NISA in the USA, says that harmful and underage drinking are actually significant public health issues. Drinking at university has become a ritual that students often see as an integral part of their higher education experience. Some students come to university with established drinking habits, and the higher education environment can lead to a problem itself or can exacerbate the problem that he or she already has. But according to a NIHA survey, almost 53% of full-time university students in the United States aged between 18 and 22 drank alcohol, and a third of them engaged in binge drinking and some in high intensity drinking. So if we look at alcohol itself, and you've heard this just now, it depresses the central nervous system. Drinking large amounts can lead to a coma or even death. And also mixing alcohol with medications or street drugs can be fatal. So what are the consequences of having alcohol, and who does this affect? Well, in Alcoholics Anonymous, what we have found is that one drinker affects, or one alcoholic actually affects 16 people, 16 significant others around him or her. So drinking affects the drinker, the students, their families, and communities. Death from alcohol-related incidences may occur as well. A large number of students may die from alcohol-related unintentional injuries, including motor vehicle crashes. Then we have the assault cases. And these are on the increase when one of the persons are under the influence of alcohol in that particular case. Sexual assault may occur, although estimating the number of alcohol-related sexual assaults is exceptionally challenging because sexual assault is typically underreported. There appears to be a relationship between sexual misconduct and alcohol abuse. Then we look at academic problems, and a large number of students report experiencing academic difficulties as a result of their drinking, and such as missing class or getting behind in academic work. In that NIHI survey, we found that students who binge drank at least 3 times a week were roughly 6 times more likely to perform poorly on a test or a project as a result of drinking. And that was 40% as opposed to 7% than students who never drank and never binge drinked. And the students who binge drank were also 5 times more likely to have missed a class, 64% as opposed to 12%. Now, we also have alcohol use disorder, which is characterized by uncontrolled drinking and preoccupation with alcohol, the inability to control drinking due to both a physical and emotional dependence on alcohol, repeated alcohol consumption despite related legal and health issues. And you find the person begins each day with a drink, feels guilty about the drinking, but has that desire to cut down on the amount of drinking, but they need that amount to keep on that high. Now, what are the factors that influence, or let's look at the consequences actually of drinking? We've heard about the suicide attempts, the health problems, the injuries, indulgence in unsafe sexual behavior, driving under the influence of alcohol, vandalism, damage, and involvement with the police. Now, the factors that actually affect student drinking varies. Now, although some students come to university with already having experienced alcohol, certain aspects of university life can lead to the problem, such as unstructured time, widespread availability of alcohol on campus, for instance, inconsistent enforcement of underage drinking laws, limited interactions with parents and other adults. Research also shows that university students have higher binge drinking rates and a higher incidence of driving under the influence than their non-university peers, non-alcoholic university peers. The first 6 weeks of the first year at university are a vulnerable time for heavy drinking and alcohol-related consequences. largely because of student expectations, of social pressure to start the academic year. So there's issues of peers, time with friends, bullying, trying to be impressionable. Remember, they're very vulnerable and they look at it as a way of forgetting stress and also the readjustment. They have a lot of unstructured time as opposed to their school time. They have a lot of free time. They have the fear of failure or the imposter syndrome. There's also the wide range availability of alcohol, particularly on campus, inconsistent enforcement of underage drinking laws, and limited interactions with parents and other adults. Now, alcohol overdose and university students appears to be on the increase. Alcohol overdose occurs when there's so much of alcohol in the bloodstream that areas of the brain controlling basic life support functions such as breathing, heart rate, and temperature control begin to shut down and can lead to permanent brain damage or death. So a person showing any of these signs requires immediate attention, such as, signs like mental confusion, stupor. And I think advise other students and develop students so that they can recognize these in their friends. Mental confusion, stupor, difficulty remaining conscious or inability to wake up, vomiting, seizures, slow breathing, for instance, fewer than 8 breaths per minute, irregular breathing, 10 seconds or more between breaths, slow heart rate, clammy skin, dull responses, and extremely low body temperature. Now, I'm not going to go into these studies, but I want to just reflect, and the ones that I've highlighted in red are actually the ones that were conducted at UKZN itself. So you have quite a bit of knowledge already at UKZN. There's a master's dissertation by Tesfaye in 2016 that looked at alcohol and substance abuse among students at UKZN, the protective role of psychological capital and health promoting lifestyle. And that study explored substance abuse and the role of gender, psychological capital, and a healthy lifestyle amongst UKZN students. Then another study by Inak et al. In 2021 looked at the risk factors for hazardous drinking in universities from South Africa, that is UKZN in particular, and Belgium, and they did a cross-cultural comparison. So there, you've got the statistics there. These are some of the other research studies, but in the interest of time, I won't go through them. But I want to refer to the one by Mkhize in 2020, which looked at the perceptions of university students on substance abuse amongst the youth, and they looked at the case of KwaZulu-Natal. Now, there's a project that's been undertaken by SAD and UKZN. In 2016, the South Africans Against Drunk Driving and UKZN partnered across 5 UKZN campuses with other South African universities. And what they had done was train 100 peer mentors and counseling staff from their campuses on drunk driving, basic road safety, and ways to run the program at the university. And they aimed at students and staff alike. So I want to just, in the final segment of my presentation, look at strategies targeting individual students. Now, universities are at the central point when it comes to these strategies. You have high individual level interventions that target students, including those in higher risk groups, such as your first year students, your student athletes, and members of organizations. Then you could get your interventions designed to change student knowledge and attitudes and behaviors related to alcohol so that they drink less, take fewer risks, and experience fewer harmful consequences. Universities can be the center of education and awareness programs. Cognitive behavioral skills-based approaches can be used. Motivation and feedback-related approaches can be used as well as behavior modification to an extent too. Now, environmental strategies are designed to change the campus and community environments where student drinking occurs. The goal is to reduce the availability of alcohol, because research shows that reducing alcohol availability cuts consumption. But then you have the paradox. What about human rights? And you heard just now about the case on drug addiction and availability of drugs for personal use. Then you have the combination of individual and environmental level interventions that work together to maximize positive effects. Strong leadership is required from a concerned university senate in combination with engaged parents and an involved campus community, and a comprehensive program of evidence-based strategies that can help address harmful student drinking. Now, no single treatment applies to everyone. Treatment should be readily available to attend to the multiple needs of the individual, but remaining in treatment is critical, and individual and group counseling is important, and medications combined with counseling. Now, you've heard that I'm very closely associated with Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've given the details of Alcoholics Anonymous on the screen. Finally, alcohol is widely used as a psychoactive substance with dependence properties. Alcohol use and abuse is associated with serious physical and psychological consequences, and it's therefore important to explore possible protective factors that may decrease the likelihood of substance abuse behaviors with detrimental consequence on the health and well-being of students. Chair, I hope that I've done justice to the presentation and I've kept within my time, and I want to hand back over to you. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Wow, Dr. Nadesan, I think we must thank you, because you took this phenomena, you contextualized it like everybody else, and brought it back within the domain of higher education. I've actually noted some interventions, and in the end, I'm going to come back to that. So we've got about 30 minutes, and in the space of 30 minutes, I just want to do a quick recap. Because as I did mention in my opening, the multi-dimensional effect of this phenomena, it's so multi-layered. The World Health Organization classes it as being a public health crisis. And today, if we listen very carefully, all four presenters brought out the issue of how critical this current reality of substance abuse and alcohol abuse remains, especially so when we speakers have brought out the issue of how this perpetuates suicide ideation, stigma, issues of stigma, name calling, shaming, judgmental attitudes. Actually, we saw it at the forefront, of these presentations. And I think also the issue of sustaining and keeping together your masculinity, and that being one of the reasons for why males would actually go into the issue of drug and substance abuse so that they can sustain their issues of masculinity. But we also heard that how in the university environment, students become powerless, and how group dynamics take over, that if you don't do this, you don't belong. That alone renders our students voiceless and powerless. The issue of coercion, the issue of pressure, the issues of fitting in, and when you need to fit in, you need to indulge as well. And also, Mr. Stemesa, he brought home very crisply the issue of misuse of dagga, how it leads to confusion, it leads to memory loss, and when there's memory loss, we find that is one of the core attributes for our students dropping out from campus and not completing their degrees, and how the issue of DACA leading to now experimentation with other drugs can also bring about mental health challenges. Even Ms. Mkhize, she drove home the issue of drinking habits, rituals, and what is outside of the university, more especially at Sanka, to address issues of prevention, treatment, prognosis, assessment centers, group therapy, and individual therapy. But of course, what we saw in all of this, and you know, it sunk in so deeply for me, that stigma and bully is even prevalent in this issue of alcohol and substance abuse. Interestingly, Dr. Nadesan also brought out the ripple effect of the individual's consumption of alcohol and taking of drugs. The ripple effect from the individual to the family, to the marital subsystem, to the children, to the in-laws, to the parents. So she very crisply pointed out how at least 16 other persons gets affected by one person's abuse of either alcohol, you know, or drugs. The issue of academic challenges. And that's what we need to actually address, because we are in the space of higher education. The richness of the information provided will tell us that, yes, we need to do much more than we are doing. I actually also ponder over the issue, and I hear it in the corridors. I'm at the School of Education, and one of the components of the curriculum that I'm very keenly passionate about is the issue of the teaching practice experience. What happens when our students also outside of university, and when they have to go out and fulfill mandatory components of the curriculum in terms of their service learning, internships, work-based placement, what is happening over there? I've heard corridor talks, but I also think that's a neglected domain, and we have to bring that into our dialogues when we're discussing this issue of alcoholism and substance abuse in the space of higher education, because it affects more than the theoretical curriculum. It also affects the placement, the experience part of the curriculum. So now, ladies and gentlemen, you know, there were a few questions put out there, at least about 4. The first one related to what programs can be offered in high schools as part of our universities or higher education social engagement programs. I'm just going to go through the 4 questions, and I'm sure you know who you are and who can answer this question, provide answers to these questions. The second question is, what strategies are out there for us to implement to prevent students from engaging in substance abuse in higher education? So what is out there for implementation? What more do we need to address? And the third question, when we engage or collaborate with the student who is abusing drugs, do we refer them to our campus clinics, or do we look at external stakeholders for support, assessments, and treatments and group therapy? Fourthly, what suggestions do we have for parents and teachers for them to be aware of to prevent their children from taking drugs or engaging in alcohol abuse? So the floor is open to our presenters, And these are the 4 questions. And, you know, if we can have some engagement on these issues. Okay, so Dr. Nadesan, you have come on. So help us unpack these questions and give us some information that we can take home with us.
Well, Rosh, I wish I had all of the answers. And I think every one of us on this platform wishes we had answers. We are sitting in a dilemma in this world. It's not only happening at UKZN, it's happening at all universities. And it's not only happening at universities, it's happening all over. When I heard the speaker earlier speak about the TIC and the sugars and all of them, and it took me right back to my days working as a social worker in Chatsworth, where we believed TIC actually, or sugars actually started, because that's a mixture of remnants of heroin and Ratex and all of that. And can you imagine what it does to the person's brain? So when one looks at substances itself, or even alcohol, every one of these has effects, and it affects everyone around them by virtue of the behavior of the person taking the substance, as you've said. Interventions is required, but we also live in a world that is also very cognizant of human rights. At one stage there would be searches, in terms of no alcohol in class and no alcohol on campus, and you can't really enforce those kinds of compulsions now. But certain universities can be an alcohol-free zone or a substance abuse-free zone. Now, you can't get charged for usage of drugs. You can get charged for possession or for dealing, but it's only the behaviors of a person that may show that he has behaviors that presented as a result of alcohol overuse or as of substance overuse. So universities need to take the initiative to look at and work closely with the rest of the university structures, your SRCs, even a parent body attached to the university. Why not initiate something like this? Because ultimately, that's who one of the 16 are. And your SRC, for me, is a very strong body that looks at the student populace and is there to help the student population. And why not bring them in? I personally had tried to run some Alcoholics Anonymous groups, or not run, introduce AA groups at my university. I think because of the stigma, it didn't work. However, we've referred people outside of the university. So if you log on to the websites, and on the chat line, I've given the details of the Alcoholics Anonymous, and you'll find a directory of services and refer. Your student services should have this on hand to refer. I do see some other hands up, so maybe I would stop and hand over to them.
Thank you, Dr. Nadesan. Ms. Mkhize, you want to continue with the discussion?
Yes. Answer. There's a question that read, are there any interventions or programs done in high schools? For I believe such behavior does not begin in the university, which is very true. We have encountered a lot of problems in high schools, and we do have there's a program we call TADA, which is Teenagers Against Drugs. So these programs are for learners either in high school or primary school, where we actually train them with factual information and allow them to run their own programs. Because another issue that we find is that our learners do not have factual information. So there's a lack of awareness in them understanding what are substances, what is substance abuse, and how they can actually run programs for themselves where we are able to mentor them. So we also provide educational talks in high schools as well, which are very factual based as well, so that learners are able to understand substance abuse at their own level. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Sandile.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ross. I will continue on the point. stated by Ms. Mkhize. Mine was to touch on the peer education side provided by the university, especially on different campuses. I think the peer education is not limited to a university space, but they need to find themselves working also with the schools in communities, because the aim is to make sure that everyone in the society we live in or in our communities is educated. And I think the peer educators can play a very big role in implementing programs in high schools, and also ensuring that those programs are monitored in a way that maybe they can start working with some TLOs, the teacher officers in high schools. And also in high schools right now, they have social workers. So if peer educators can come up with programs that they can run in different high schools. Like for an example, I've been in a high school. It's located in Umbumbulu. At that particular point, we were faced with in our school. We noticed that most of our peers are using drugs, and that's affecting their academic performance. So we created our own group where we called ourselves peer educators. So we wanted to make sure that we eradicate this drug abuse in our school. So us being learners and being mentored by our school principal, and also engaging with some members of SANCA, Bobby Bear, they assisted us a lot in ensuring that we are running programs that will assist our schools. So I think having people from outside visiting schools will also encourage learners to partake in programs that will help to eradicate this drug use, especially and substance abuse, especially in high school level, and also mentoring, and also making sure that all schools are covered in different areas, because you find that there is a school in a different area or in another area that is receiving such assistance, but what about other schools in other areas? So we need to make sure, especially in an area where we are based, at least we say we are involved in programs run by learners in trying to eradicate. So I remember, I think it was 2016, we were in a point where we invited someone who was using drugs before and was convicted because of what he has done after being high. So he was recovering and all that. So he came, and then he spoke to us as a school. We invited a lot of people, and it did work because we ended up even organizing a march. So we collaborated with 5 high schools, and then we organized a march. We were on the road. We're saying, community members, stop selling us drugs. You should stop selling us alcohol, stop selling us this and that. So I think learners need a push. They need someone from outside who will come and say, yes, we can do it. We can do it. And they can help in fighting the drug and substance abuse in a school level. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sandile, for putting us in the picture with regard to, what can happen in the school. But, I just want to go a little back as well. As much as the school environment and the university environment perpetuates this kind of social, social dysfunction. But, even in the family, as Dr. Nadesan spoke about the capitals that the people carry with them from one environment to the other. And it's safe to say that this issue of alcoholism, a child carries it, most probably from the school, is personalized community outside, from the family, is personalized community outside of his home, his neighbors. It happens in the school environment, socialized in that way of living, so only socialized in that context, carries it to primary school, to high school, to higher education, and who knows, to his place of employment. So, if you look at it, I want to go back to what Dr. Nadesan says, the ripple effect, the societal impact, the societal dysfunction that's prevalent in this issue of alcoholism and substance abuse. Before I round up with interventions, would there be any other comments that anybody would like to make on this issue before I just wrap up possible interventions or preventative strategies that, you know, we can think of for implementation? Okay, so it's none. So what I did was I just picked up some of the intervention strategies or preventative measures that we can start thinking about. You know, we can create some kind of blueprints and carry this conversation forward. Mr. Stembiso, when he discussed the issues of DACA, he did mention that some people would take the DACA to lose weight. So possibly, you know, we need to look at strategies, maybe like nutritional workshops, or like gymming workshops, and use that as avenues of weight loss rather than being attracted to the use of DACA to institute weight loss. What we also saw is the vast psychosocial impact, not only psychological, not only sociological, but from, you know, the presentations, you could see this is a psychosocial challenge. It's a psychosocial complexity. What kind of psychosocial programs we can put in place together, because it became very clear that this can lead to suicidal ideation, name calling, judgmental attitudes, stigma, issues of bullying. So we need to look at what kind of psychosocial interventions we can put in place, what kind of coping mechanisms we can put in place, assessments, educational and awareness talks. If you look at TADA, what kind of programs can TADA, SANCA even come into the university space and offer it to our students? One of the speakers also mentioned that we need to look at training programs for peer mentors. I think that's very, very important. We have a lot of mentorship programs going on in the space of higher education. So possibly we need to look at the introduction of peer mentorship programs, focusing on the issue of alcoholism and substance abuse. We also need to look at changed attitudes. How are we going to change students' attitudes, knowledge, and behavior as far as this issue is concerned? We need to look at cognitive behavioral skills-based approaches. We need to look at possibly introducing this as part of the curriculum, because our students are going to go out into the working world and they need to take some kind of capital from higher education so that when they transit into the world of work, it's one that is smooth and one that is acceptable and one that will allow them the space to become productive in their spaces of employment. And just a few other mechanisms or interventions. We need to look at how the strategies we can put in place to reduce the availabilities of alcohol and drugs, because research has shown that this cuts consumption levels and it cuts down risky behavior and it cuts or it reduces harmful effects. Lastly, and which I think is so important, and in my opening, my introduction, I did mention, the conversion of multiple identities, when we look at alcoholism and drug abuse. Many identities, one individual, but many identities converge and comes to play and intersects and becomes difficult for the student or the individual to attend to. And Dr. Nadesan very nicely put it, that she vociferously made the claim that we need to attend to the multiple identities or the multiple needs of individuals who are facing challenges and complexities in the space of substance abuse and alcohol abuse. With that in mind, we have come to the end of the program, and I want to take this opportunity once again to thank each and every one of you. I want to place on record from the University of KwaZulu-Natal Student Services Division, I want to place on record our sincere thanks to our panelists. I can't imagine myself without this kind of knowledge. I really, being in the space of higher education and being a social worker, this is important information. It's rich, and especially you, Mr. Sandile, it was like you took a microscope and you went around and you fine-tuned this entire issue of, your presentation. And the same goes for every other presenter. So yeah, a very big thank you to the panelists, all those who attended our program, academic staff, professional staff, students, and various other guests. Thank you so much. I'm not sure whether it's safe to say safe travels or just say enjoy a lovely afternoon. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you, Roshan. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you so much. It was very motivating, very inspiring.
Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh, bye, Kenny. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you, Pam, and all.
Kenneth, your sound is bad. Come through, Raj.
Hello. Sorry, Pamela, you were saying something?
Yeah, Kenneth, I think the sound connection was a bit weak from his side.
Yeah, it stretched out a bit. Yeah,
no, it was a lovely webinar, Rosh, and
yes,
thank you. It went very well.
Yes,
I think there has to be some sort of continuation from there.
Yes, in fact, I also picked up a lot of issues from last year.
Yes.
And, even this year, these issues came out, like, education and awareness. And
sure.
Yeah, it was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Mr. Stembiso, I think what blew me off is the issue of human trafficking in the space of this abuse.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, I think we're still live.
Yeah, I think you continue, ma.
Hi, Rosh.
Mr. Kenneth, I think your sound is a problem.
Hi, Rosh. I don't know. Can anyone hear me? Oh, okay. Am I clear now? Hello, Pam, can you hear me?